Trouble.
Either, I think.
Grand. Let more people in.
I'll watch the waiting room for you, Gina.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. So we're recording now. Great. So thanks very much to everybody for coming to this event today, our lunchtime learning event on working with young people in direct provision centres. So this is the second event like this we've done in Youth Work Ireland. The first one was on outdoor youth work, that took place I think there before Christmas, and yeah, it went really well, and I think some people on this one were on that one, so it's great to see everybody here. So what I'm going to do is just a quick round of introductions, just briefly. So if you just introduce your name, the service that you're from, and then if you look around the screen and pick somebody who will do the next introduction. So I'll start. So my name is Gina Halpin and I work in Youth Work Ireland National Office. So I will pick Nicola.
Hi Gina, how are you? I'm Nicola and I'm currently working on Loughrea Youth Project with Youth Work Ireland Galway.
You pick someone, Nicola?
And I'll choose Shay.
Hi Nicola, my name is Shay. I'm a youth worker with Limerick Youth Service. I'll pick Mark.
My name is Mark Noble and I work with County Longford Youth Service, and I'll pick Aoife.
Mark, my name is Aoife Dare and I'm a youth worker with the Irish Refugee Council, and I will pick Sinead.
Hi, my name is Sinead and I work with the KDYS in Clarny in County Kerry, and I pick Sarah Jane.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jane and I work with Longford Youth Service, and I'll pick Suzanne there.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Byrne and I work with Youth Work Ireland National Office on the Corlin and Oak programme, and I choose Elaine.
Hi, I'm Elaine and I'm Youth Development Worker with Youth Work Ireland Leash, and I choose Debbie.
Hi Elaine, I just saw Elaine a few minutes ago at a different meeting. I'm Debbie, I work with Waterford and South Tipperary Community Youth Service, and I work in the Manor Street Youth Project based in the inner city in Waterford, and I pick Anne. You're on mute, Anne.
Hi, how are you? I'm Anne Marie. I work with KTYS running the Corlin and Oak project in Kerry. Thanks. And I pick, oh, sorry, there's another Anne. I pick Anne Brennan.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Anne Brennan. I work in Youth Work Ireland North Connacht. So I'm based in Sligo. I'm the information officer, and I also work in the Direct Provision Centre in Sligo as family coordinator.
Do you want to pick someone, Anne?
Oh, sorry. Oh God, who hasn't been picked? Lisa?
Hi, thanks, Anne. Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm Youth Work Ireland Meath, and I pick William.
Hi, I'm William and I'm with Youth Work Ireland Tipperary, and I'm going to pick Charlene.
I'm Charlene and I'm from County Longford Youth Service, and I pick Michael.
Yeah, Michael McLaughlin from Youth Work Ireland National Office. I'll pick Olivia.
You're on mute there, Olivia.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I work for InSync Youth and Family Services, formerly known as Kildare Youth Services, just after changing.
Yeah.
So let me think who I'll pick.
Is there anybody who hasn't introduced themselves? Maybe they can raise their hands.
Pauline.
Pauline and Matthew.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pauline, Youth Work Ireland Tipperary, and I suppose here today for Tipperary, Corlin and Oak. Thank you.
Anyone else who hasn't introduced themselves? Matthew?
That's me, yeah. I work in Youth Work Ireland National Office. My name is Matthew, and I work on practice resources and practice for the Federation. Yeah. Oh, is Miriam just joining us?
Miriam's just popped in, yeah. Hi, Miriam, you're on mute. We're just doing a round of introductions, Miriam, so if you just want to introduce yourself and your service.
Hi, I'm Miriam Nyhan. I work for Clondalkin Youth Services in Cork. I kind of manage a group of young people, or a group of youth workers as well in UBU. So, and we work with direct provision in Mallow.
Brilliant. Is that everybody? We haven't missed out on anyone, have we?
Sharon.
Sharon, go ahead, Sharon.
My name is Sharon. I work with CDYS here in Mallow. I'm part of the UBU project, and I also work with direct provision in Mallow. So I pick Dawn Ryan.
So I'm Dawn. I work in the CDYS office in Mallow with Miriam, and I also work with direct provision in Mallow, and I'll pick Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm on student placement in Mallow with CDYS.
I think Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura. I work with the FDYS in Gorey, and we work with the direct provision in Cortown. I don't know who else is to go.
I think that's it. Yeah. Great. Okay, thanks for that. It's great to see so many people here. We weren't sure how many turned up, but just shows that there's a huge appetite to kind of work on this and talk about it as well, talk about the work that we're doing. So I suppose these events are kind of simple in format in that it is about creating a space for us to learn from each other and hopefully to take away some ideas and that we can use in our own practice. It's also a chance for us at National Office to kind of look at what the gaps are and see where we fit into the picture and how we can best support yourselves in the work that you do with DP centres, and Matthew will speak to this a bit later on. So we know youth services play a key role in supporting young people in the centres. They've done it for years. We know that the work is varied. We know it's challenging. We know also that it goes beyond the, I suppose, the traditional scope of youth work, and that youth workers are kind of pushed to do more, go beyond their boundaries, and also go beyond the funding requirements. So it's a huge issue, and there's a lot of issues that are coming and challenges that are coming to the fore. We've done a bit of work on this so far, and stuff around access to centres is something that's come up for us. Better supports for youth workers and how they can support young people. The issue of trauma seems to be coming up again and again in our conversations, and and the impact of that trauma. So I suppose added to that then is the developments towards the end of last year, where the DCYA's remit was expanded and now has equality and integration included in it. There's recommendations from an advisory group who are calling for the DP centre system to be replaced and for other service provisions to be put in. Now, we don't know what that means, and we don't know if there's a time frame for implementation, but I suppose what we do know is that there's potentially change coming. So for Youth Work Ireland, it's good for us to kind of have a national coherent picture of the work that's being done out there and how we can kind of do more and support that work. So we had brought together a small working group within Youth Work Ireland member youth services, and we have begun to do a bit of this work. We've done an audit, which you may have fed into. We have a report on that, and Michael has done a one-page kind of high-level briefing that has gone to the department. So this lunchtime learning event is the next step in this work. It's widening the conversation, bringing more people in, and then trying for us to identify what's our roadmap going forward? What do you think we need to do? What are the supports that you need in order for you to do your work? So that's really the aim of today. So it's to get your feedback on this. As I said, widen the conversation, and hopefully you'll go away with some ideas as to how you can support your own practice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Michael from Youth Work Ireland, and also Aoife Darn is here, which we're delighted to have her here from the Irish Refugee Council. So just to kind of talk a little bit about the DP centres, where they came from, what's the national context, and then maybe what's the European context. So give us kind of an overall picture. And Then we'll go into the more specifics of the challenges you face and your experiences, and then the next step. So that's the format for today. So I'm going to hand you over to Michael now for the next segment.
Thanks very much, Gina, and well done, and great to see so many people here. And we see it on paper every so often when we do these audits. What are we doing? What are we doing? When we see the people and we hear that you're all out there, you know, dealing with DP centres, which we're really conscious isn't really necessarily 100% prescribed as part of our work, but people have taken it on and done it and responded to the need. I think it's fantastic. I think Aoife's going to talk more in detail about direct provision and its recent history, and we can all do our best to say what's going to happen. I'll start probably very, very high level, unfortunately, maybe a bit too high level, but I think it's never any harm just to let people know where we sit. And I always start these discussions, and I do some work people might know in Brussels and a bit of international stuff. And even there, I find people sometimes don't quite have the terminology always precise. And the problem, I suppose, the group here today is I say people who know a huge amount, but maybe some people who feel they're very new to it and all that. So forgive me if I'm telling people stuff they know already. I mean, just at the very, very basic outset, like we're talking mainly about work with refugees, and a refugee has a particular legal definition. It's someone who's effectively received the status of a refugee under the 1951 convention, which effectively gives you a status. You are fleeing from persecution, you're in fear of persecution, in fear of your life, and you are given a particular status to be protected. That's quite important at the high level. We then have a lot of other phrases that people will know about, like asylum seeker. An asylum seeker is someone who's seeking that status. They haven't necessarily received it, they are seeking it. And you'll hear that a lot around direct provision and other things like that. Then we have the whole gamut of migration, and we hear about economic migrants and people who are
Stalled a bit.
He's frozen.
Frozen. Maybe he'll come back.
And he was in his flow.
Yeah. Yeah, I had meetings this morning with him, now it was fine. The joys of Zoom.
Will we maybe move on to the next item and come back to Michael?
Yeah, maybe Aoife, if Aoife, you want to come in at this point. Actually, Michael might be coming back now.
Let's wait a minute. We might just send him a message in the chat, will we, to say he's frozen, in case he can.
Yeah, I'd say he knows.
Oh, I think he's gone.
He's going. Anyway, Aoife, do you want to kind of on a bit?
Yeah, I'll just say hi first of all, and I just want to say thanks to Gina for inviting me to be here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about your experiences. Those of you who are doing this work, I have obviously experience myself, but it's it's quite limited. I'm only one person, and I also wanted, like what Michael said, I can see that there is quite a vast range of experience here. There's quite a few names that I recognize, that I've come across before. So yeah, some of what I say might be new to some of you, but some of it I'm sure you will know already. Michael's back now, so we might just check back in with him.
Sorry, this is a quick change of venue, so probably should. For some reason, it's happened a lot today. I'll finish. I was just saying, drawing attention to the various different types of categories and words that people will hear, and just think that's quite important. And then I think just very, very briefly, then just talk a little bit more about international issues, and that we have a world body, a UN body, the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees, and they do a lot of good work and produce a lot of good data. And it's just to get people to understand a few things. We have 80 million forcibly displaced people in the world, not necessarily refugees, but forcibly displaced, drawing attention to the fact that a lot of people are displaced in their own countries. If you look at the crisis in Syria and various places, people don't even leave the country. They leave the unsafe part and move to the safe part. So the UNHCR talk a lot about displaced and forcibly displaced people. The vast majority, I think over 80% of those people are actually in the developing world. They generally leave a conflict country and they move next door, maybe to another conflict area, to another safe state. The vast majority of refugees never come to the developed world. And it's just something to bear in mind, I think, in terms of that public debate. Another player that's increasingly in, you hear a lot about it in debate, is the European Union is now a huge player in this question, because we have common movement within the European Union, and the external borders are generally controlled in a common way. So you'll see a lot of the situation, particularly from Syria, where refugees, asylum seekers end up in Greece or on islands or getting on boats or coming to Malta. And it's a huge crisis for the European Union. They've really struggled to deal with it. There's been various iterations, and I was going to talk later, maybe at the end, about we were forming a partnership with a Turkish organization to do youth work and try and work on youth work issues with them, because they have 2 million refugees, for example, in Turkey. But you'll hear a lot about the European Union and a common approach, or the failure to find a common approach, which is a real issue, and issues about moving people around and redistributing people in the European Union, which does come up a lot, because many of the groups that we will be working with locally, for example, we worked with Rohingya population from Myanmar in Carlo, and they were a resettled program of resettlement that came about, and that's happening a lot with Syrian refugees. On a very technical level, Ireland isn't required to do any of that. We're not part of what's called Justice and Home Affairs provisions in Europe, but we voluntarily opt in and say we'll take certain numbers. So they're just things that people will hear a lot in debate, and sometimes it's important that they have a grasp on them. I suppose just to talk a bit about our own thinking, or early thinking, what we've been doing is discussing things a lot with the Children's Rights Alliance initially, who were very keen looking at recent developments. And we took the initiative ourselves to contact the Department of Children and get the title right: Children, Equality, Disability, Integration in Youth, I hope. We took the initiative ourselves to deal with the officials on the youth side. At the outset, I'd say, about this type of work and what Gina's highlighted and the research that we've done. At the outset, I'm repeating something I said in an earlier meeting, that even the department, this is what Gina mentioned, the coming together of all these different aspects is nowhere near bedded down, hasn't even started. So people in youth affairs, when you ask them about refugees, shrugged their shoulders. They're very well-meaning, and we'd like to do something that sounds important, but we don't know about it. They're in a different building, so we're not really sure what's going on. So I'd love to give people, it'd be great to say we've got this fabulous joined up new department and everything's going to be great. There's no indication of that. There's no indication that there's been much joined up thinking at all between people. I think even I talk more about we have this new report, as Gina said. I suppose just a political judgment. It's my own judgment. That's just what I think. I think there'll have to be progress in direct provision during the lifetime of this government, because there's massive political, nothing to do with well-meaning morality. There's just massive political capital now invested in it, particularly by the Green Party, who have the minister in that department. They have a very active junior minister who has background in the area, and they just can't be seen not to deliver something on this. That's just my judgment. Whether it'll be a wholesale, every single direct provision centre is closed and gone by the last day of the government, or whether there'll be some snap election over something, who knows? But I think there will have to be substantial progress, just for that kind of cynical political reason that there's been a commitment given and one party has gone kind of all in on the issue. So you've got to suspect there will be a lot of movement. And there's talk about, I think it's supposed to be a white paper any day now. So this is back to the yes minister way of doing politics. First we have a discussion, and someone makes a decision, you get into government, then we have an expert report, and then we have a white paper, and then probably an Oireachtas committee. And these things take a lot of time, unfortunately, whereas you think there's a report there and says what's needed. Let's go and do it. I know Aoife, the Refugee Council, have a very good document I was reading the other day, which I think was excellent. But it is another, and it's not a criticism at all, but it is very much just a pointer for the youth sector and people working in our field, that a lot of this debate is going to be about buildings and accommodation and housing and things that are just perfectly understandable. But I suppose our job might be to fill out the more social and community side of things in terms of our activity. And that's sort of what we've been highlighting with the department. So I might just briefly even just summarize some of the things we did say. It was just, we literally gave them a 1 or 2 pager saying, look, this is early days, this is happening, here's what we can do. I think we made that point very much, that this is about the community basis of what we do and looking for the fit. So I think we said in the introduction, so many people are doing work in this area, but we've all been doing it off the back of an envelope. That's not, again, any disrespect to people, but there's no systematic, organized, planned, funded system here. And to get into the jargon, and some of you know the UBU, the targeted scheme, will say, yes, you could work with people in direct provision, but I think as other people know, that's just one of many, many groups. Well, you've got loads of disadvantaged groups, you've got people living in bad housing, people whose parents are unemployed, you've got people with drug problems, you've got other immigrants who wouldn't be necessarily in direct provision. So it's just yet another group. I think the feedback we get from these type of meetings and groups is that's nowhere nearly good enough. You know, this is something that needs a planned and systematic approach, and that's certainly what came up in our discussions with Children's Rights Alliance and the youth sector. We're very much getting involved in this, because the youth sector are mentioned in the Cat and Day report a few times, and that was the response. So at the high level, first of all, you need some sort of statement or policy or whatever. You can't just say, good luck, there's target funding, get on with it. I think also then the notion of the youth service being a voluntary service is critical, because I mean, so many people, it seems to me, are shunted around between providers and here and there, and very little sometimes control over things, even down to what they eat and what they do. Whereas the youth servicing from day one, when I remember us getting involved in direct provision first, was very much the voluntary idea that, look, this is here, it's free, it's open, it's accessible. These are really important things when you're on practically zero income and you're trying to get something to do with people in the teenage years. I think we ourselves then have to think a bit more about issues around people's experiences, so trauma and PTSD and all this kind of the journey that people have come through, again in a more systematic way. People might be aware of it, but I mean, to have it more systematically ingrained in terms of what we're doing and agreed with people like funders and departments. They have to realize that these are costs, and that will come back, I think, from the discussions we have with people, that youth workers, and Sarah Jane will always say this, youth workers are going around doing things that no youth worker has to do normally, or generally doesn't have to do, and looking after people's basic needs about transport and accommodation and schooling and books and all that, and very admirable and absolutely correct. But we wouldn't really, normally kind of tolerate it in other areas. So I think there'll be a job for us in our discussions to say, look, we're going to do youth work here, and the question is always, who's doing this other stuff, or why is it coming up? And that's probably down to our lack of knowledge about some of the systems that that are over on the justice side that we rarely deal with. I think again, it's been well flagged, and just repeating what we're hearing back from people, that the whole cultural awareness, a lot of youth workers, for the best will in the world, probably aren't will themselves say they're not sufficiently culturally aware of where people are coming from. The difference about culture and religion even, and let's be honest, boys and girls, teenagers, that kind of thing. There are a lot of issues come up there, and that's going to be a struggle. So all in all, I think what we're trying to advocate for is a more systematic approach, one that the department then gets behind completely, and inevitably one that's reflected in funding. And that's not like a lot of stuff in the youth work sector. It's not mega books, I don't think, but most of all, it can't just be another group or another issue to be added on to your targeted work. That's just isn't going to wash, I think. And that's really kind of a key message. So that's just a quick overview from what I've been seeing to date. Thanks.
Great. I will. Oh, Gina, you're on mute. I don't know if you're speaking now. Still on mute, but I will just.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What was wrong with it? Yeah, so thanks, Michael. Aoife, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I will. So yeah, I had a chat with Gina about this, and we just thought that I would go over quickly kind of how we got here with direct provision, what's happening now, and what might be ahead, and briefly what's going on for young people who are living in DP. And as I said, I think a lot of this won't be new to you. I imagine that you know all of this, so I'll go through it quite quickly because I know we want to get on to the next stage. So as you know, direct provision was set up in 2000, so over 20 years ago, and it was set up by the government at the time to deal with what they saw as this kind of influx of people seeking protection in Ireland, and they really wanted a way of kind of managing the people who were coming in and dispersing them away from major urban centres so that they didn't create kind of ghettos where they were living and congregating. So they had it was a particular policy of dispersal, which is why you got centres kind of being built and set up all around the country in areas that were possibly not ideal for hosting a group of vulnerable people. But that was the goal, was to kind of disperse them around the country. Also, as you know, it's a for-profit system, pretty much, with a couple of the centres are owned by the government, but the majority are owned privately. And I think I read that in the last 20 years, DP has cost us 1.3 billion. And in 2019 alone, we spent 129 million euro on accommodation for people seeking protection. So that was a mixture of direct provision and also emergency accommodation, which is really quite expensive as well. And also, as you know, it was originally intended for short-term stays. So I think at the time they said, it would be around 6 months. They never imagined, or at least they said they never imagined people would be in the system for as long as some of them are. And I'm sure you've all met families and young people who've been there for a long time. I think the longest resident in DP that I worked with was a family who'd been there for 14 years. So the young person I was supporting, she'd entered DP at 4, and I met her when she was 18, and her family got out when she was 19. So it's just like, it's insane really when you meet people who are in the system for that kind of length of time, but also, 3, 4, 5, 6 years is also way too long. What's happening now? So direct provision is now under IPAS, which is the International Protection Accommodation Services. It was formerly called RIA, the Reception Integration Agency, and I still often refer to it as RIA, and I know lots of other people do as well, but it is IPAS. And IPAS has moved, I think Michael said this, it's moved to the DCE DIY, and they are responsible for allocating people to certain centres, for transferring people between centres, and for like all associated matters, dealing with complaints, dealing with requests, all of that kind of stuff. There's currently, or at least as of 2020, there was 38 direct provision centres in Ireland, and 34 emergency centres, and around 5 COVID hotels, so places where people were being sent to quarantine if they had COVID or if they were close contact with COVID. So it's 5 of them. So there's almost the same amount of emergency centres as direct provision centres, which is really not great. Like the emergency centres, I don't think they really come under the same scrutiny as the direct provision centres, and even that scrutiny is not really that in depth. The emergency centres are definitely less well regulated and more expensive, and they seem to be, quite a lot of them are quite small B&Bs or hotels kind of dotted around the place, and they're really not fit for purpose at all. In general, all direct provision centres are B&Bs or basic hotels. There's a caravan park in Athlone. There's obviously Mosney, which is the old holiday camp. And there's a few which are kind of apartments, like self-contained apartments. I think there's one in Mallow. There used to be one in Dublin, but that's closed down. But most of them are B&Bs or hotels. There's around 7,400 people in DP at the moment, and around 2,250 are under 18. And the average length of time in direct provision is 2 years. And I think at the moment, or maybe it's even extended now, but people are waiting up to 9 months to a year for even their first interview. So that just means like they arrive, they're allocated to a centre, their basic claim for asylum is processed, but then they're waiting for a really long time to even have that first interview, which is very disheartening, I think, for people, and they have no idea when that interview will be. And a lot of the interviews, in fact, maybe all of the interviews have been suspended because of COVID for the moment. So people are going to have even longer waiting times from now on. One interesting thing that I came across recently was just the ages of people in DP. And just for us, I think the relevant ages, 13 to 17 and 18 to 25. I work mostly with 18 to 25-year-olds. But in the 13 to 17 range, there's about 220 young people living in direct provision, and in the 18 to 25 range, there's 713. That was accurate as of about 6 months ago, so it could have gone up. But below those ages, so preschool and primary, the numbers are quite high. There's like nearly 700 preschool age children and about 650 primary age children. So in a couple of years, they're going to be, if they're still in direct provision, they're going to be the teenagers that are engaging with youth services. So I think the numbers will increase quite a lot. And it's just something to be aware of, that even though, 219 doesn't seem that many in the teenage range, there will be a lot more in the next few years. Rights and entitlements. So as you will also know, people in DP get a small weekly allowance. They get $38.80 per adult and $29.80 per child. This is very low, but it's quite a lot more than it used to be. When I started working with IRC, it was 19 euros 10 per adult, and I think 9 or 10 euros per child. So it's increased by about 20 euros, which is really not that much when you think about inflation and when you think about all the stuff they have to buy for that, especially families. But at least it's incrementally gone up. They are entitled to a medical card, but only if they actually stay in the centre. So now that people are able to work after 6 months, some people are able to work after 6 months. We found that they are choosing to not live in the centres themselves because they can actually afford to pay rent. But this does mean that they lose access to their medical card, and obviously they don't get the weekly allowance. But I think, at least for the young people I know, that's offset by the fact that they're living in their own place and they're pretty independent. So that's really good. So the right to work comes in after 6 months. It used to be 9, it's just been reduced to 6. There are some restrictions around that. It's not universal for all people seeking protection. It depends on where they are in the process. So they have to have not had a first instance decision, which means that they can't be appealing a negative decision and also work. You can only get a work permit if there has been no decision on your claim for protection yet. And there's also a right to education up to leaving cert, if you're the right age. I know of young people who, would have been maybe 17 going into direct provision and weren't allowed or weren't supported to access school because they were on the cusp of kind of being quote unquote too old. Also, what's really important now is because the work permit system has come in, people can access the VTOS and the Back to Education Initiative and Youth Reach. If they're eligible for work permit, they're eligible for all those programs as well. And that's really good. And I think, for anyone working in those fields in Youth Reach especially, like, it's really good to remember that they don't get the allowance payment, but they can do the course. In terms of third level, you might know that there's currently no funded, there's no right to third level education for people seeking protection. They can only access third level if they pay themselves or if they get a scholarship or get private funding. A lot of the universities have sanctuary of scholarship places available, but they're quite, there's not many of them, and they are sort of restricted to the people that are living close to those or in those urban centres. And so that can be a huge problem for young people who are living, for example, in Kerry, like in Killarney or Tralee, you know, trying to get transferred to Cork or Limerick or Dublin so they can take up a scholarship that they might have won to attend college is really difficult. Like transfers aren't very easy at the moment. So it's just, yeah, it's just quite an ongoing issue that the scholarships are coming, more and more scholarships are coming online, but they're not like, it's not an equitable system because it really depends on where you've been placed in which centre you've been placed, whether or not you can access that scholarship. What is ahead? As Michael said, there is a white paper due out at some point this week. And apparently it's going to outline how we're going to transition away from direct provision. So yeah, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that, see what they say. IRC released a report a little while ago to inform that white paper. It was kind of to bridge a gap between the Catherine Day report and the white paper, and it was around alternatives to direct provision. And it outlines a number of different ways that the government could go about transitioning away from DP, and it's quite a dense piece of reporting. There's quite a lot in it, and it presents like quite a few different models of accommodation. So, you know, I'm not going to go through them all because that would take a really long time, but I can share a link for you to access if you're interested. Ultimately, the kind of overarching model that we are advocating for is, and it's based on what was also in the Day report, is a 3-stage model where the first stage is when people just arrive, they would stay in a reception centre for a minimum of 3 months. And then the second stage is when they get moved on to own door accommodation. And there's various different models for what that own door accommodation could look like. And they stay in that accommodation until they get a decision on their status. And then the third stage is supporting them to move to private rental accommodation or social housing once they have a decision on their status. So that's the basic kind of framework. It is essentially would be arguing for, you know, for it to be a not-for-profit system, although we do recognize that for-profit is not inherently bad if those profits are plowed back into the process. You know, like housing bodies would be for profit, but those profits are kind of put back into maintaining and keeping things going well. And the other main thing that it's based on is kind of this idea of integration from day one, so that like at the moment we in Ireland, we kind of, asylum seekers, people seeking protection, are not included in the national integration strategy, and we focus on integration from when they get their status, when they get a decision. But IRC and other organisations in this area are very keen to promote this idea of integration from day one. So as soon as you arrive, you are supported to connect with Irish communities and integrate with Irish communities, that you're not isolated for those years that you're waiting for a decision, because sometimes they can take such a long time that, like, if you're not working on helping people to integrate and connect during that time, then you're losing all of these years of supporting them.
Yeah.
So I think I might leave it there, Gina, because I don't want to take up too much more time.
There's lots there. Yeah, no, there's lots there, and it's great to hear that the overview there as well. So thanks a million for coming in, and thanks. I really appreciate it. Great. So we're going to open the floor now and get yourselves to kind of feed in and give us kind of an overview of how you feel and what your work looks like. So we're going to do this in 2 stages. So we're going to look at the experience in supporting young people. So really we're trying to highlight what's worked, like what have you done, anything innovative, anything that you want to share with the group, that's something that's actually worked and improved your practice in either accessing the centres or the supports for the young people. We're also going to take time then to kind of look at the challenges, and then we'll look at practice supports after that. So we will keep it to the 90 minutes. So I'm going to hand you over to Lisa, who's from Youth Work Ireland Meath and is on the small working group that we've formed, and she's going to guide you in, you know, just highlighting some of the experience and supporting young people in DP centres.
Thanks, Gina. So basically, I'd like to say I'm really all ears. So when it comes to, you know, the experience, you know, if anyone's willing to share something that's, you know, worked, something, you know, something that's even small, because it could make a, you know, a difference to, you know, to somebody else as they try to, you know, engage. So would anyone like to, you know, step up and share their experience? Any hands? Thank you, Debbie. I was getting a little bit flushed there.
No, I'll jump in because I'm sorry. I'm going to have to go at 2 to something else. So I'm really glad. Just wanted to get a chance to jump in, and also really good to see us doing this work together and sharing together, because there is so much going on. And I suppose I was on holidays at the end of last year. It was really good to read the report of what's been pulled together, because it's important that we know what each other is doing. I didn't get a chance to feed into it, but a lot of what we're doing in the inner city, in our organisation in Waterford, Waterford's very big. So like some of the clubs and some of the projects would be working with young people where there's direct provision centres close to them. In the inner city, what we have found we're doing more of is work with programme refugees or people who are undocumented. And I think that that's really important. I know it's a different kind of a conversation to the direct provision one, but it's been, I suppose, look, we share the experience of what that can be like. Mostly with like young men from Afghanistan, and the young women, we can't really keep them for too long. They tend to get pulled out really quickly. But what worked really well, what's the point I'm making? The point I'm making is it's really important those young people are represented somewhere, or we're talking about them somewhere, because I often find I'm talking about it and people are like, let's not talk about that. Let's just pretend that that's not really happening, which is not actually honouring the experience of these young people, because they are in our communities. And in really precarious situations in a different way to the young people who are living in direct provision centres. But yeah, what worked really well for us was a link with one of the schools, one of the secondary schools in Waterford City. There's a teacher, there's a programme, they've got English as a second language programme, and the teacher has really piloted it like the way we work around corners, she's working around corners as well, and she has really championed getting space for these young people. And she's really good at linking in with us. So we work very closely in partnership around young people. So as soon as a young person like comes on the radar is the best way to describe it, because they're not young people that anybody knows about unless they interact with some kind of a service, or there's somebody in a service maybe who picks up their experience and kind of looks a little bit further into the support needs that they might have. So working really closely with her has been really important. And they went through a school of sanctuary process, but she's linked in with the Department of Education. Somebody from the Department of Education came because the Department of Education don't necessarily have their own system, or they don't really have any process around how students with English as a second language are supported in schools. So we kind of pieced it together, and we're in the process of writing up what that has been like for the two of us to work together, I suppose. And the Department of Education are interested in looking at that at a national level. What does that mean for other schools? Because it's kind of an anomaly, I suppose, in the system. But anomalies, as we are very used to working with, particularly when we're working in the area of social inclusion, an anomaly sometimes is necessary to include the most excluded young people. So I think there's a lot of potential. There's potential for us within Youth Work Ireland, but there's a lot of potential in terms of linking with other agencies, state agencies, services in the areas we're working in, because that wraparound is essential, and how we're talking to and working with each other is really important. So that's just something that's worked really well. Lincoln School, but like that, it's not necessary. Every school is not necessarily going to say, yeah, come on, let's do this. Let's look at this. And certainly even in our own local context, all of the schools are not opening their doors to these students, because very often they're arriving and they don't have one word of English. So the support needs are really, really high, which you will all be used to working with as well. But just working with that school has been really important. And then just the importance of recognizing, looking for and finding young people who are undocumented or who are in somewhere in the program refugee system. And that's what we've kind of been working with in the city. And then there is the work across our projects with young people who live in direct provision. But just, I think it's important that we're doing this piece of work.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. Thanks. I feel you could just like drop a mic.
No, but we all could, like we all could. Like, that's the power of us coming together, is we all are working with these young people, and we're like, right, like, like I'm trying to partner with a Muslim women's adult group to train them, because we're like, right, the Muslim young people, the young women are with us till 11 or 12, and then when they get their period, they're not allowed to leave the house, and I'm just like watching young people disappear, and we can't let that happen, I suppose, for those young people. And then, but the partnership with the Muslim women's adult group is really important, because I went to them and I was like, what can we do here? And with all respect, being like, is there a way for this to work? If they said, no, this is not going to work, then I would listen to that. But their solution was that to have Muslim women involved in the delivery of what we're delivering would be key. So that's the kind of way we're going about it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate that. So I'm just wondering, is there anybody else that would be good enough to share? Oh, I see Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi there. So I'm in Longford. We're in Longford town basically, and we're working with the young men that are in the direct provision centre called Richmond Court. So Richmond Court is all males and it is 18 plus. So they're all young adults, 18 to 25. Just some of the things that we've done with the guys there. Obviously, football is a major draw for the lads. It seems to conquer all nationalities, no matter where the lads are from. One thing that they all have in common is, well, 99% of them, is that they all love to get involved in football. So it can be a great tool to engage the lads definitely on a weekly basis, especially when weather is good and things like that. So where the youth centre is based in Longford, it's a little bit to one side of the town. And where Richmond Court is, it's kind of on the other side of the town. So it was a little bit of a distance for the guys to walk every Friday night or whatever nights the group was on for the guys. So what we done was we came up with an idea that we'd contact our local Garda station, and we got some bikes from the local Garda station, and we had to go further afield as well. We got some from Store Street and some, I think, from Athlone and Mullingar as well. The guys then took the bikes, and what they done was the ETB, the local ETB, provided us with a bike tutor. The guys worked on their bike to learn how to do things like fix the brakes, fix the chain, fix the puncture, some other tricky bits and pieces as well. And then the lads got to keep the bikes as kind of their part of the program. So once they got to keep the bikes, they were able to get to the centre more quickly. Also, they were able to access things like GP's appointments, or get to things like the train station, or even get to the bus for any of the guys that were studying training in colleges or in the training centres. That would be just one of the things that we've done with the guys in Longford. Some of the other stuff, we done a photography as well. We done a short photography course with them, ran over 6 weeks. And it was based on kind of what the guys liked in Longford, or kind of things that they seen in Longford, so through their eyes. Again, our local ETB were good enough to provide us with a tutor for the 6 weeks. And at the end of the 6 weeks, what we had a small exhibition of some of the photos that the young people had taken. They got to caption them themselves as well, and mount them on the boards. And that was held in the local library. So it was a good way to bring down the likes of your local TDs and your local county councillors as well, to see some of the work that people are doing. So there would just be two of the types of work that we're doing in Longford. Obviously, there's a lot of work then with regards to the likes of looking up courses, helping with paperwork, helping for permission to work and bits and pieces like that. English lessons as well, getting them to refer into basic English lessons. And one thing that really struck out with the lads, when we'd speak to the lads and we get a little bit of feedback from the guys, before the youth service was involved with the guys in direct provision in Longford, they were all very on their own. So there was no group for them. There was no space that all those young people or young men were coming together. It was more a case of you kept to yourself and you stayed in your own room. While when they got involved with the youth service, they kind of realized that, God, there's 16, 17 other young men here of my age group that I have a lot more in common than I ever thought I did before.
That's brilliant, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing. I really do appreciate that. Thank you. So I'm just wondering, anybody else would like to share?
Yeah, my name is Shay. I'm a youth worker in Limerick Youth Service.
Hi, Shay.
How are you doing? We have a dedicated youth space on Saturday mornings. This is pre-COVID times where young people would come in and engage from around maybe 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have two age cohorts, 12 to around 11 to 13 and 13 to 17. So Limerick Youth Service is quite broad. We have different projects in the county and in the city. So what we try and do is we try and merge the young people in different activities. For example, maybe fishing, they could go biking. And it's all about exposing the kind of the migrant young people to Irish young people. And that seemed to work. But I think the highlight for me was that the young people decided they wanted to air their views in relation to their experiences of living in Ireland. So they looked at it from the point of view of living in direct provision. They looked from the point of view of the experiences of everyday racism. So we did a script over 6 weeks, and then they produced the script, and then they performed in the Bell Table, which is a theatre in Limerick, to an audience of roughly about 150 people thereabouts. So it was an extraordinary journey really for those young people, because they were actually going out there and they were telling their own story. And I think that was really powerful for them and for the audience. And we got an evaluation afterwards. And, you know, the audience didn't really realize or had different perceptions of people that are living in direct provision. So it was very, very successful. So that's my story anyway in relation to the young people I engage with.
Shay, thank you so much. Pretty much blown away by that, for that, allowing them to have that space. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good, you know, and we're kind of, this is probably a bit different, but we're actually going into schools, or we were going into schools again pre-COVID, where we were delivering kind of cultural awareness and anti-race workshops to transition year students. And we tried to kind of change it around so far as that, okay, young people will listen to young people. So we looked at doing a peer mentoring program. We got funding from Limerick City Council, whereby the young people would do training over 2 days, and then they'd go back and they would deliver the program back to their peers and also to first and second years. So the idea was to try to create awareness and empathy around the challenges that young people have that are non-Irish. And
brilliant.
And unfortunately, we couldn't actually deliver it. We had 5 schools that were involved, but because of COVID, they weren't allowed to mix with different classes. So we're going to look and hopefully we'll be able to get funding in September to go back into maybe 8 or 9 schools, get maybe 2 young people from each school to represent their own school and do the training, and they'll go back then and deliver workshops, and that will kind of open conversations around minority groups and the challenges they face. So, and I think that could be open right through nationally, because I think it is quite effective, because it does challenge young people's perceptions. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Shay. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
So, Olivia, did you have your hand up?
Hi.
Hello.
I'm relatively new to this role. I'm team leader in Newbridge in the Curry Youth Project only since November. So obviously lockdown was on. We're not allowed into the direct provision centre. We've one in Newbridge town itself. But what we have been doing is, and successfully doing, is we have young people in the direct provision centre who took part in our transition programme. Our transition from 6th class into 1st year. So they would have taken part last year and they are still engaged, and we have 4 of them, and they are still engaging with us on a weekly basis in a group on a weekly basis, sort of getting that support. But I'm just finding it a little bit difficult at the moment with COVID because we're not allowed into the centres. I'm also working alongside the school completion officer. And she, you know, she'll come back to me if she's any concerns, but it's still a work in progress with us here in Newbridge. So it's a piece of work that I'm going to be taking on. Hopefully, COVID changes everything, as you know, because you can't really get near them. So everything in Zoom, and they struggle on Zoom because of the situation that because they're in a direct provision centre, they won't turn on their cameras. And, you know, I'm lucky if they come on. But also there's been 2 rather horrible outbreaks of COVID-19 in the direct provision centre in Newbridge, and we just found that young people, even though we were able to engage, and they pulled back then, you know, there was a lot of testing going on, and now there's a lot of uncertainty about where they're going. Some of them think they're being moved, you don't know where, so there's a lot of support needed, but that is a work. That's why it was so interesting to come on today. I'm learning an awful lot here. I don't know if you've noticed, I've been scribbling since she started, so it's all very new to me. So it's just great to hear. And it was great to hear Shay there, get some great ideas from Shay and even from Mark down there. I'm saying down there, Mark, because you're on the bottom of my screen. But yes, so it's been very, very interesting. But that's how we're targeting them at the moment, is going in that age group for the transition, and supporting them through the transition from 6th class into 1st year. And I will have a number of young people, again, transition program starts now in April, engaging from the direct provision centre. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to do an awful lot more, you know, going forward. But that's how we're getting into it.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Not at all. Thanks a million.
So I don't know if my time's up yet, Gina, is it?
Kind of, yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I think I went over.
Unless anybody else wants to quickly feed in, and I suppose sorry, go ahead, Aoife.
Sorry, could I quickly just say something just before we move on to challenges? I know I'm not part of Youth Work Ireland, but I can't help myself. It's really interesting to hear everyone's experiences, and I just wanted to share 3 things that I've found has worked really well for me running projects with young people in DP. In general, and the first one is, if you're applying for funding for any piece of work, specifically with young people in DP, that you build into the funding proposal specific budget lines that relate to their specific needs. So, for example, a project that I'm doing at the moment, I knew it's online, and I knew that young people in DP, that some of them wouldn't have access to computers, so I built, so I requested budget for computers, for laptops for them. So it could be that, or it could be, if your project is going to be in the evening and you anticipate that they might be skipping meals, because meals are a set time, 6 o'clock, they can't eat. If they miss it, they don't get it. So you might build into your budget, money for food, or money for snacks, or for travel, or whatever it is. It's just those little things have really helped me to make sure that the young people can do the project, and that it's sustainable, and they're not missing out, and they're not hungry, and they're not able to connect, remotely or whatever. The second thing that I've found has worked really well is using creative methods with the young people. So I've done a number of projects that have been based around like the methodology has been through drama and the arts, music, song, those kind of things. And I find that can be a great leveler, because, a lot of people, even if their English isn't brilliant, they can play an instrument, or they can do some drama, or whatever it is. and it's just it's a lovely way of connecting and kind of, you know, especially looking at themes around identity and belonging. The creative arts work really well. And then the third thing I just wanted to say very quickly is that I've done projects that have been integration projects, so they're mixed between young people who are seeking protection and Irish young people. But I've also done projects that have just been for young people seeking protection. And I think that it's really good to think about both those types of projects and what kind of spaces work well as integration spaces and what spaces work well as, you know, just providing a safe space for young people in DP to come together as they are. And I think that just that there's both of those types of projects are really important, and we need to try and build both of them into our work. That's it.
Thanks, Aoife. So, sorry. So we'll move on now to Sarah Jane, who works in Longford with Mark, and some of the challenges have already come up in what people have been saying, but I suppose for us, if we can identify the challenges or kind of the core ones, then we can kind of look at practice supports and how we kind of lobby or do advocacy work from that. So I'm going to hand you over to Sarah Jane.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Again, like Lisa, this is open to the floor, and a lot of the challenges have come up already as we've been talking, and the supporting documents that were sent out raised a lot of the challenges and barriers that workers face, like including the dealing with the trauma, learning about the new cultural norms, and a huge one as well that came out was about workers being very frustrated about having little or no budget to do this. So a sense then of underachievement for the young people that you're working with in direct provision. I would ask everybody to just give us one challenge, because time is tight. We've about 25 minutes left now to wrap the whole lot up. One challenge each. And then if at the end of the discussion, if there's a challenge that hasn't been addressed, to throw it in the chat box so that we can take note of it. If anybody has experienced a barrier getting into the direct provision centre from the managers or for whatever, we'd like to hear about that as well, and maybe how you overcame that, because that's coming up quite a lot across the board. So staff can't even get in to begin the youth work with young people. So like Lisa, I will open it up if anyone would like to volunteer, or we can do round robin and I can pick names out, whichever you prefer. Anyone like to go with a challenge? Nicola, lovely, thank you.
Hi Sarah Jane, how are you?
Good.
I'm just listening to Aoife as well. So in terms of a challenge, I've very little experience in this area, even though I've quite a vast youth work experience. But my small bit of experience in Galway, Northeast Galway, was with a group called Atmos Collective, who are DP inhabitants themselves, like they're resident in DP in Galway. But their music, it's music and the creative arts that they're using. And the challenge, I suppose the biggest challenge we had for those guys, and it was very much an integration project. It was them coming to us to do stuff with young people we were working with anyway. But the biggest challenge was getting there. Was actually just being able to come into the. Is that me feeding back now? Or?
Yeah.
Sorry, no. I might take off my headphones. Actually, might be easier.
Can't hear you, Nicola, there now. Maybe Lisa, if you could mute as well while we're not, or Shay, anyone who's not muted, we'll see if that'll stop the feedback, please.
Can't hear you, Nicola. No.
Nicola, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, so maybe put your headphones back on. Nicola.
Hear us. Can't hear us.
We can't hear you. Put your headphones back on. Put your headphones back on. Put your headphones back on.
Any better?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect, Nicola. Thanks.
You
Sorry.
hear me and I can hear you now.
Yeah. We had a few people not unmute, Nicola, so if you want to
No,
put
I can hear you as well.
Yeah.
No, you could hear me then and I couldn't hear you. Sorry, Sarah Jane. Yeah, technology. Yeah, great. Yeah, the challenge for them was transport, getting there, getting out of the city to us at that stage out in Northeast Galway. So that was a challenge. But again, yeah, and the challenge for them really was only for the worker. If the girl working with them hadn't been there, we would never have met Atmos Collective. Do you know? So it's a huge challenge. I think that was probably the main one, was having a willing worker or a willing partnership, shall we say it, to broaden it out. And just, yeah, if you're not in a city, trying to do this work, which a lot aren't now at the minute. Ballahadreen's another one up in the north of Roscommon that is just so isolated. So their isolation is compounded then, isn't it? For them. So yeah, I suppose transport, willing partnerships, and yeah, the isolation of these rural settings for them must just be, can only start to imagine how they were getting their isolation feel.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. Yeah, transport comes up a lot. I think it's addressed sometimes in some of the agencies with interagency work with someone who might have a bus, or do like the community policing in some areas have buses and they use it for that. But yeah, thanks, Nicola. Anybody else for challenges?
Yeah, I think kind of the challenge we experience presently, I think it applies to young people in general, is in terms of online engagement. It can be difficult, you know, even though we're quite creative around it, it can be difficult. And some of the feedback from the parents is that they see their young people online during their school hours, and they just feel maybe that's enough, you know, and that is a challenge that we have presently. And the response we're getting as well from the parents is that, okay, once you start doing once you start doing outdoor activities, and once they can go back into the U Club on Saturday mornings, then they'll engage. But it's very kind of hit and miss at the moment. It's quite mixed, you know. So, and that's the concern, because a lot of these young people don't see their peers.
Yeah.
And even in one centre, there was 2 cases of COVID. So they're all self-isolating. So the family is self-isolating. So that obviously then compounds the pressures and the isolation as well. So that would be a worry from my point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. And that's echoed in the working group quite a bit, that a lot of the work that had been started then when COVID kicked in, that it's causing a bit of a hindrance, and that maybe a lot of the workers are back to square one with those young people. Audrey, I know you wanted to come in there.
Oh, hi. Yeah, just to chat, I'm actually a student in KDYS in Killarney, working with Direct Provision Group. Last week we had the group online, and there was a young man who he's in Direct Provision in Killarney, but he's actually up in Dublin at the moment. He had to go up, and he was sharing a room with somebody that got COVID, so he was stuck there for a couple of weeks. But he's lactose intolerance, and the food that he asked them, would they be, it's just what Aoife was saying there about funding. He asked could they change his sandwich for his lunch, and they said, no, this is what you get, there's no choice. And he also said that the dinners, he didn't like the dinners that were coming. I could see that, like, these are basic needs, and you know, he was very frustrated, but he wasn't giving out. He was saying, you know, we were saying, like, so what are you eating? And he said, well, I have a breakfast. So we took it that that's really all he was eating. So I just want to know, like, what would you do as a youth worker in that scenario?
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. It's very difficult, and you see there's a big online campaign about the food in a lot of the centres. I don't have the answers to that. In Longford, we have a food cloud in our company, and we bring the food cloud into the young people in Direct Provision. There was a lot of work to be done with the manager around that, allowing that to happen. But I suppose the manager thought it was best to let us in than to not let us in case we might have talked more. But maybe the Irish Refugee Council would be better placed in terms of dealing with that and advocating and lobbying for that.
Yeah, I was actually just going to send you a direct message, Audrey. Maybe you could email me about that young person, because we are able to assist people who are quarantining with some of those basic needs, sometimes directly, but also through advocacy. So I'll just send you my email address there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Aoife.
Thanks, Audrey, and thanks, Aoife. Anybody else for a challenge?
I just think that like, it's great that we have Aoife on today, and she probably knows all the different agencies that you could contact to talk to about, you know, different things that are coming up. And I think there's a huge lack of knowledge there, and the more info and the more informed we are, the more we can help people. So, because we were directed to work with Direct Provision with no sports, no training, just go do it. And in fairness, we got out there and we met them, and we are coming across different challenges. So the more support we can get, the better. But it's very difficult during the COVID time when the restrictions were down, we could meet people, and now they're gone back up, we can't. And even though you saying there about a grant, I applied for a grant for homework support or something like £2,000 or something. And I've now asked them, could I change it to buying the kids' devices, because there's only one device, one iPad in the family, and there's 4 kids all trying to share a device to do their homework. And I've asked, could I rechange the grant to buying them devices? And I'm still waiting 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later for a decision on it from the Department of Justice, which is like crazy. So, you know,
it's hard, Miriam, to when
it's
you're
frustrating.
facing challenges like
They're
that.
going back to school next week, so well, some of them are, so that's a good thing. Sometimes it just takes a long time rather than kind of reacting quickly. Things just take a long time to kind of get a decision.
And that's the whole part where the workers kind of feel unsatisfied then, and then they're not providing enough services for these young people.
And while we're doing a load of food cloud, and they're so, they actually, some of the families are nearly fighting over the food cloud when we arrive with the van, you know, in the sense of trying to grab what they can, what they need. But they really are reliant on that food cloud now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's becoming, that's not our job, like, you know.
I know. And this is what Michael, we would allude to it, Michael, all the time. This is not our job. Someone needs to be shouting and advocating for this. We wouldn't accept this in other areas of society. So why do we accept it now? So it's the lobbying piece and the advocacy piece. Yeah.
And we did a whole campaign at Christmas, delivering Christmas parcels to them, you know, just so that they had stuff for Christmas for their young people. And our youth councils did a lot of work around that as well. You know, but you know, I'm sure they felt it was charity coming in the door, and they're losing their own self. You know, it's just hard on the families.
Yeah, and we're all tipping into the charity model a bit, I think, in terms of bits of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Michael, yeah.
There's an overarching, I don't know, again, not to put it all in Aoife, but like there's an overarching issue that we struggle a bit, which is the centre. It seems to be these centre managers are all powerful, or it could be right or wrong, or some are good or some are bad, like everything in life, but it's a private sector model. But then there's there's the agency at the sides, the two kind of parallel. There's the centre manager, and then there's the Department of Justice, and well, they're both. I think that's I mean, is it possible to explain? Is the centre manager sort of, maybe, I suppose they're probably wrapped up in health and safety and security and all this stuff too, but like, are they all powerful, or how does it work? Or
No.
Or what's the...
No, they're not all powerful. And actually, when I was, I did a bit of research around this for Gina when we talked about youth workers being stopped from going in. I was asking my CEO, like, what was the legal basis for that? And he said, there is no legal basis. Like, you can't, he actually sent me the extract of the legislation that provides for, allows for people, including youth workers from organisations that are supporting residents to have access to the centres. And even in COVID, because youth workers are deemed essential, like even COVID shouldn't be being used as an excuse to stop you from going into centres if you're providing a service to the residents there. So I think like there's no legal basis for it. I think managers, like my own opinion is that they, I don't know, the way that they interact with IRC could be quite different to the way that they interact with you. Like they would be very wary of us. The first time I went into a centre to do a youth project, like they like completely freaked out. They thought I had hidden cameras on me. They thought I was doing and I was like, no, I'm just here to do an art project, you know, like really downplaying what I was doing, like to try and make it seem as non-threatening as possible, so that I could just get in the door. But yeah, I think for me, it's just been about building relationships with the managers, you know, just very slowly, bit by bit. Like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. Oh, I'm just coming to chat to some of the young people, you know, they don't get out much. Like that really kind of like plumosing a little bit, like, oh, you know, I know this, you know, you're doing a great job. Like I hate it sometimes, but like you have to kind of butter them up a bit to get in. But yeah, like as far as I know, there's no legal basis for them saying you can't come in. Like,
Aoife, would you be okay to share with us that extract so we can get it circulated around?
I just put it in the link. It is up on. Perfect. It's out there. It's on their website, so it doesn't seem to be a private document, but there is.
So that's the one relating to COVID, and then this is the one
overall.
Can I also say that one of the initiatives that we got funding during the summer was an organisation called Safe Haven Ireland, and they do kind of sailing opportunities for young people in direct provision, and they gave us funding. I think we took about 10 kids for a week to Oyster Haven, and they were very good. Everything was paid for. So that might be something that some people, if you are living near the sea in Galway maybe, or in Dublin or Wicklow, Bray, whatever, that them, you know, if you contact them, you might Safe Haven Ireland, and they try and work with kids in direct provision and give them the opportunity to kind of get involved and stuff like that. So,
perfect, thank you, Miriam.
I add something in there just on two things. Miriam, you were talking about the iPads and getting technology and the difficulty with that. I work in Sligo with Globe House Direct Provision Centre. I'm in there I work as a family coordinator 2 days a week. I work as a youth worker the other 3 days. So we got funding from TUSLA for the families to get iPads to do their homework at the beginning of
last year,
back in March, actually, at the beginning of COVID. And they were the ones that approached us and said, oh, we've got money, because that's what they're meant to be doing. You know, TUSLA, it's all about families, children, young people, etc. So I don't know if that's an avenue, but
yeah, we can check it out.
We also went back to them this week because some of the kids that hadn't started last year have started, or they hadn't started in May, they started in September, and they didn't have the iPads. So we had to go back this year and just say, and there was no big problem, seemingly. The other one was about the food. Audrey, you were talking about somebody with special food needs, etc. I mean, what I found over the last few years is St. Vincent de Paul for food, because they will give them vouchers. So it's a matter of writing a letter of recommendation and getting the contacts in St. Vincent de Paul locally and saying, look, I'm sending this person down to you. This is their situation. They like to get a background on the person. And then once they know when the person turns up, you know, what the real story is, because they've had a reference letter, they're very happy to give them food vouchers for Dunnes Stores or Tesco's or wherever. So that might be an angle for that young person with the food intolerances, just for an extra support. And the other thing, I mean, challenges of getting in contact and supporting them. I have developed, because I'm career guidance counsellor in my youth work job, so I've done videos of just CVs, how to do a good CV, and also ones for how to do, you know, interviews and cover letter. And I've just kept them very simple, very basic, not loads of language. So it's really kind of got over the language barrier bit of trying to talk to them without being actually able to, and anybody can access it. It's up there on YouTube, so they can access it 24 hours a day, etc., for adults or for young people. But I've kind of aimed it at the young people without much experience. So it's for any young person, but particularly it helps when there's a language barrier. So
how do we find it on YouTube? What's it under?
You will find that's a good question. What's it under? It's Sligo Youth Information Centre. Could I send you the link maybe?
Yeah,
I'll put it up here now. I just have to go and find it on my.
You can send it to me, Anne, and I'll send it around to people afterwards if you want.
Gina. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Sorry, Anne. Just wondering, can we go with them to the St. Vincent de Paul?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Or attend with the. Okay, great.
Yeah, I do that all the time. I'm back and forwards to the Department of Social Protection, to St. Vincent de Paul, you name it, forever. I do probably a lot of one-to-one work as opposed to having groups of young people coming in. So we do a lot of that. And the other thing was mentors. I've worked with, I suppose, a young person who, you know, came here, no parents, from Afghanistan, all the horrible background that comes with that. and I've been sort of helping him for the last 2 years. So he's knows the system, knows the terminology now. So what I'm doing is I'm linking him with another young person who's now starting off and has appeared. He's from a different country, but it's just to support him, and it's like a little mentoring thing. So I'm hoping to grow that those are here, that are kind of a good influence, and they will mentor those that are coming brand new into that don't have any parents or any family, and that are in great need of the wraparound service. So that's another one.
But there's an opportunity of doing online materials to support young people in direct provision. How to open a bank account, how to apply for college, and what are the opportunities there. Because they're the kind of things we're doing on a regular basis.
So that's really a lovely close to the challenges, and that moves directly right into the next steps, the bit that we wanted to go on to. So that's yeah, and thanks very much for the input. It's a really hard area to work in, but it's really rewarding. So youth workers, we should be looking at human rights and equality, so we should be invested in it and keep going forward. Thanks.
Is that me then?
That's you, Matthew, yeah.
Right, time's short, so I'll jump right in. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear from you, your ideas of supports that we can develop together. And in fact, I really need to emphasize that, when we develop these resources, we usually do them together. So what I'm going to try to do is a quick poll to get your ideas of what we might focus on in terms of a resource. So let's just try this. Right. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. It worked. Okay. So what we have here are, about half a dozen, 7 different ideas of the kinds of things that we've done in the past as far as practice resources and supports. Now, I'm not saying we're going to do any of these, but if we could do a quick poll and you could choose one, that would allow us to get an idea of the kind of priorities you have. Are you able to see me right now as you look at the poll, or is it just the poll you see?
You can move it around.
Oh, okay, so you can see me as well. So I'm just going to run through what I mean by this. So the first thing that we could do is we could do some kind of like a basic set of quality standards. And, it could have other things in there as well, but we've done that before. And, we've worked together with our members and young people and experts to develop, quality standards. Another thing we could do, or we could do all of these, but, just trying to get some priorities here, is some sort of a competency framework, things that people should know and the ways that you need to be prepared to work and the skills that you need to have to do this kind of stuff. We've also developed kits like, multi-session programs. So we could do that kind of thing. And then this is a practice framework that we developed around sexual health. So, it suggests, checklists, guidelines, principles of youth work that could be done. And then we've also done research, what works, case studies of different kinds of work. And then we've done like more intensive programs with evaluation frameworks that go on for like 6 weeks. And then this is probably I think we might end up with something like this myself, and this is a piece that Gina did, which is really everything. It's a toolkit, it kind of pulls everything in there. So, right, it looks to me like your ideas you're really focused on the idea of maybe some kind of a multi-session pack, like something you could deliver to young people, a practice framework, and or a toolkit. So those are the basic ideas that we have. So I think that's what we got. So yeah, basically everyone's landing on toolkit. I think it's toolkit, if I understand this poll correctly. Yeah, toolkit, practice framework. So let's just talk a little bit about what that might look like. Some of the ideas about what kind of things would go into a toolkit, so that we can put together a group and maybe start working on that. Open the floor. Any thoughts? What would a toolkit look like?
I mean, toolkit for the youth workers?
Yes, yes.
Specifically.
So a practice support for youth workers, yeah.
Well, I would think an introduction to what direct provision is and how it's, you know, what do people get and what they're entitled to. You know, what are the barriers, you know, because there's barriers to education, there's barriers to working. Maybe the agencies.
Yeah, okay. So that is the kind of thing that we have in toolkits in the past. Definitions, legislation,
Yeah.
key contacts.
Yeah.
Would you like to see things like maybe case studies or even, you know, models of practice for things like it has been raised that perhaps there might be a you know, a model of practice around or resources around trauma-informed work. Any thoughts on the relevancy of that? And in fact, actually, it'd probably be worth doing a poll on that to get a general steer, because that keeps on floating around. And it might be good just to have a show of hands, those who don't think that that would be a relevant piece of work, to see if could anybody give an indication if they disagree with that, because that seems to be something that keeps popping up.
When you say understanding what trauma is,
yeah, and how you might employ it in your work with direct provision. So, you know, guidelines, practice guidelines around addressing trauma and being aware of trauma in the context of direct provision. Is there anyone that thinks that that's not an area that should be investigated in this?
Well, from my perspective, I think I wouldn't see myself as qualified to engage in depth with somebody that would have experienced trauma. I wouldn't be comfortable with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I
Sarah,
suppose
you're talking about if someone has suffered trauma, how to work with them in the sense of adverse childhood experiences and stuff like that.
Yeah, let me be clear. The kind of supports that are usually provided to staff analogous to you, or staff like you, are not like, here's a counseling program to support young people around trauma. It's just basic trauma awareness, things to be cognizant of, terms not to use, you know, it's just your own skills in being in that situation. It's not putting you in the role of a counselor or a support. It's allowing you to do your job. So I guess really the question is, again, is there anyone that, you know, doesn't think that that's a relevant issue to be raising or to address within a toolkit? And it seems not. So right. Any other ideas about things that might be in there?
Maybe funding opportunities.
Just there's a few bits there in the chat, just cultural awarenesses in particular about approach exploring norms, good practice guidelines, resorts. Yes, that's a good bit there, yeah.
And I would suggest that probably what we would do is we'd reach out to people and gather everyone's experience and, you know, what's worked, and make sure that that's there as well.
Like most people, like if COVID wasn't there, most of these kids would be integrating into your normal youth clubs anyway, and youth groups. So what we were looking as well as education around how you would manage that, and how in the sense of different cultures and different nationalities are coming in, and how you could actually maybe bond them all around a certain, you know, football is a great one, but just a bit of education around cultural differences, and you know, there's religious stuff there as well, you know.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're moving towards something like a toolkit. Probably what we'd like to do then is put together a small working group to gather the practice and develop drafts, consult with yourselves, say, is this it, is that it, is there anything else that needs to be in there? But yeah, it seems like we're moving towards some kind of a general toolkit is what I'm hearing so far. So that's, you know, time's short, so I've really rushed this. And I've got a very rough idea, and we're at 2:31, so I think I really need to close it there. But if anyone has any last thoughts about it, you know, have I picked this up wrong? Are we moving in the wrong direction, or is it something like a general toolkit that we're moving towards? It'd be good to hear that before we close up the conversation.
I think you're spot on, Matthew, with that summary and wrap up.
Okay, fantastic. That was rough and ready and quick, but we got there. Thank you very much for that. And sorry. Be in touch if you want to be on a working group to land there.
So thanks, Matthew. That's brilliant. We'll follow this up with a note on today, and we'll reach out to you again for the working group to expand that out. Michael, I think Michael just wanted to flag something with you quickly before we head off.
Yeah, just that I'm not sure how widely aware people are that we have developing a partnership arrangement with Moodum. They're a Turkish refugee support organization. And unfortunately, it's been all COVIDed, so it's been delayed and kicked back. It's an Erasmus funded project, so this will be we're looking for workers and managers, so this would be a natural place to start. And it's very simple. It's exchange of workers. They were to come here and we were to go there, and simply they've got people doing frontline work with young people. They want to know more about youth work. I think we know something about that, and I suppose, as we're saying today, we want to know a bit more. Working with refugees, they obviously have millions, and they're dealing with similar issues. The organization very sound, by the way. I know there's issues around Turkey and what they're doing and all that, but this organization and the individual we're dealing with are I think very reliable and dependable, and no concerns in that regard on my side. So I'll probably email people again if that's okay, Gina, but you'd be the natural place. I think this side of the summer we might just do a little half-day, getting to know you sessions online with them, just to keep it moving, and then hopefully, who knows, second half of the year into next year we might do it properly. We thought it was one of those projects where in person was hugely important. I just don't think it's the kind of thing we want to go and visit their centres, maybe have them come to our youth centres or talk to workers. Just don't think it's going to work virtually, but so we keep on kicking. We decided to do something virtual before the summer, and I'll let people know. But so I suppose you could sign up for the virtual maybe, but if you're signing up for the virtual, I'm kind of hoping you'll do the real, but let's see.
Can I just jump in, Gina, for 1 second?
Go ahead, Lane. Yeah.
If there's anything that could be done, I suppose I sat in for Natalie, who's doing direct provision centre work.
Yeah.
But my work, and I've actually come in touch with the Irish Refugee Council in relation to this, is the next steps, the moving out of DP, how people are put into communities, new communities, and integrating, and the trust level of what organizations to trust, haven't been separated for so many afterwards, and young people around that, because I know we've supported a good few young people that have been in the communities now, having left DP, and kind of the level of who to trust when they go into the communities and where to go and what to do, having not been integrated beforehand. So maybe if there's anything to be done around that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, Elaine, I think that's very important, because I had a young person that exited DP there in September, but in terms of finding suitable accommodation within her financial remit, the social and emotional upheaval, and the confusion in terms of dealing with state agencies. There was no one signpost, so it was quite complicated and quite traumatic for her.
Yeah,
So
and even the fear, I think, Shay, I don't know if yours is the same, the fear to stir the pot, because it took so long to get the status or to get out into the community.
Yeah.
Like we had a young person who had her name messed up on her card, and it took them 14 months to get that fixed through the Department of Justice, with us hounding and lobbying and working with the IRC and 2 local politicians who actually spoke for us. When the mother, we came back to her to say, well, why didn't you push? She was like, I was afraid I'd be kicked out, or I'd go back, or it'd go against me.
Yeah.
Because this, just to finish off, this particular young person was living on her own, so she had no support other than herself and Limerick Youth Service, but she just felt she wasn't being taken seriously as a young adult. So, and it took nearly 5 months for the process to finish. So, I think there's a gap there.
Yeah, definitely, Shay. I would have worked before I did family coordinator. I was transition support worker for people moving from direct provision into the community. And one of the big things is we kind of developed little booklets on what do you do for the accommodation side, or the different agencies. And it's not just the moving out, it's actually the support they need, the follow-on support. That's where they need it most, because when they're in direct provision, they have a certain amount of kind of stability and support and knowledge. But when they move out, they do feel kind of on their own, and the things, you know, paying rent, paying bins, all the different scenarios. They just don't know lots of things. So there's a whole little information thing that could be done there and put online for accessing.
Can I also suggest maybe that we could set up an advocacy youth group for young people in direct provision, that they could have a voice, because we haven't really spoken about what their realities are, in the sense of what they would like to see changed, and maybe see if we could lobby for change, especially around education and access to education, or access to, you know, as they're getting older, this is where we're coming up with most of the problems.
That is something we spoke about before, and the need to, you know, hear their voices. So that is something that's in the plans, but again, COVID and Okay, well, thanks very much for that, everybody. We've gone over time a little bit, so I'm aware of that. Thanks to Sarah Jane and Lisa and Aoife for coming in, and also for Michael and Matthew from National Office. We'll follow this up with a note and keep everybody in the loop, and send you on more details as we get it in terms of the working group and the toolkit whenever we get around to it. Hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, but it's great to hear. Just the experience is just incredible, and the work that's being done is incredible as well, but it's so obvious that there's so much more to do and so much more support to, you know, to roll in behind you all. So we're very aware of that. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.